like this is all fake.
Jack Black just compared Meghan Markle's new show to Goop with daddy issues, and now she's reportedly in therapy. In a roast that sent shockwaves through Hollywood, Jack Black tore into Meghan Markle's latest lifestyle venture, mocking her for what he called weaponized wellness and branding her new series as self-help theater wrapped in royalty. With razor-sharp lines like, "I kept waiting for her to light a candle," called Victimhood by Meghan, the actor publicly dismantled the Duchess's image, and insiders say the fallout was immediate. Sources now claim Meghan is seeking therapy in the wake of the backlash, as the roast gains viral momentum and celebrities quietly pick sides. So what exactly did Jack say? Why did it hit so deep? And what does this mean for Meghan's future in Hollywood? Stay tuned, because the full story is even more brutal than the punchlines. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. In the age of instant virality, where a few sharp words can ripple through the cultural landscape like a seismic wave, Jack Black's unexpected roast of Meghan Markle ignited a firestorm that no one saw coming. His comment, delivered with classic Black flair, was laced with irreverent humor and a healthy dose of social commentary. But it wasn't just the joke. It was the timing, the delivery, and the target that gave it its viral punch. The remark, "It's like Goop." If Goop had daddy issues and a royal complex, didn't just mock Meghan's new lifestyle brand. It encapsulated a broader public sentiment in one sentence. It suggested not only satire, but an unraveling caricature of royalty and celebrity intersecting at peak absurdity. As clips of the roast surfaced online, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram exploded. Influencers reposted it, media pundits debated its meaning, and fans dissected it frame by frame. On Reddit, users opened threads titled, "Jack Black just ended Meghan Markle," and "When Jack Black becomes the People's Prince." TikTokers mashed up the clip with scenes from School of Rock or Tropic Thunder, amplifying its comedic reach. Memes surfaced within hours. Photos of Meghan edited onto Goop packaging, candles named Scent of Victimhood, and side-by-side comparisons of Meghan and Gwyneth Paltrow dressed in flowing white outfits with captions like, "Only one of these women owns her weirdness." The online reaction wasn't entirely one-sided. Some came to Meghan's defense, labeling the roast cruel and unnecessary, arguing that Jack Black, a man, was belittling a woman trying to reclaim her identity. Others saw the joke as not only justified but overdue. To them, it symbolized a growing cultural fatigue with celebrity pseudo-spirituality masquerading as authenticity. The public was split, but engaged. That engagement drove headlines, think pieces, and even evening segments on late-night shows. Black's comment served as a catalyst. It united unlikely audiences: Gen Z social commentators, Gen X comedians, royal family watchers, and even some progressives disillusioned by what they perceived as Meghan's transformation from a relatable outsider to an overly polished brand machine. The statement tapped into the same cultural nerve that caused Paltrow's Goop to become a punchline. When self-care becomes performance and emotional trauma becomes marketing strategy, people notice. The public's reaction was intensified by the way Meghan's team chose to respond, or didn't. For hours, there was silence. No rebuttal, no Instagram story, not even a cryptic quote posted in cursive font about "rising above." The silence only fueled speculation. Was she stunned? Offended? Strategizing? When a single tearful paparazzi photo emerged of Meghan leaving a wellness spa, wearing oversized sunglasses and clutching a copy of a mindfulness journal, the internet went into overdrive. Was she seeking refuge? Was this a calculated PR moment to appear vulnerable? Or was she genuinely shaken? Further controversy emerged as Meghan's fans started a counter-campaign, tweeting hashtags like #DefendMeghan and #ComedyIsNotAnExcuse. Meanwhile, Jack Black's supporters started selling merchandise with his quote printed on t-shirts, mugs, and tote bags. Etsy shops sold out within hours. One particularly viral product was a candle mock-up labeled, "Victimhood by Meghan. Smells like persecution and papaya." Some called it tasteless. Others called it genius. But regardless of opinion, it was clear the roast had broken through the celebrity noise. Even major news outlets weighed in. The New York Times published a Sunday Styles piece analyzing the cultural implications of celebrity wellness brands and the fine line between empowerment and exploitation. CNN aired a segment on how comedy can serve as social critique. The Guardian pondered if the roast marked the beginning of the end for Meghan's influence in the wellness world. For Jack Black, a man who's built a career on satire, absurdism, and unpredictable energy, the moment was a bizarre convergence of Hollywood comedy and British royalty. He had commented before on celebrity culture, but never had one of his quips landed with such explosive power. It raised questions. Was this a planned jab? A spontaneous remark? Or a deeper commentary on how fame, privilege, and personal branding can morph into self-parody? As more reactions rolled in, it became clear the story wasn't going away. Meghan's brand, with Love, Meghan, was now unofficially linked to Goop in the public consciousness, and not in a flattering way. Instead of being viewed as a genuine attempt to share lifestyle insights and personal growth, many began to see it as a calculated echo of an already satirized template. The line between sincerity and spectacle had blurred, and Jack Black had pointed it out with surgical precision. To understand the depth of the public reaction, one has to look beyond the meme economy and into the psychological undercurrent. Why did people respond so strongly to this roast? For some, it was catharsis, a way to express long-simmering frustrations with Meghan's narrative control. For others, it was about power dynamics, the idea that celebrities, especially royal-adjacent ones, are fair game for satire. Still others saw it as a litmus test for free speech and comedy in the age of identity politics. Can a comedian call out perceived hypocrisy without being accused of cruelty? Interestingly, the roast also sparked a brief online movement among therapists and psychologists. Several took to social media to dissect Meghan's public image from a psychological standpoint. Was her brand really about healing, or was it about performance? Was vulnerability being commodified? Was the therapy movement becoming diluted by celebrity influence? Podcasts were launched overnight with titles like Victimhood Branding, From Goop to Meghan. Influential therapists wrote LinkedIn articles unpacking the implications of emotional branding and the ethics of monetizing healing journeys. Among the more serious critiques came from academic corners. Media professors commented on how this event underscored the shift from traditional celebrity branding to emotional storytelling as commerce. Meghan, once heralded as a disruptor of royal traditions, was now facing the same scrutiny as any influencer pushing authenticity for profit. Of course, there were voices urging compassion. Not all responses were mocking or analytical. A few celebrities, including some close to Meghan, posted messages of support. One wrote, "People forget that behind the headlines, there's a real human being. Satire is powerful, but so is empathy." The post went viral as well, suggesting that public opinion remained fluid, not firmly entrenched on one side or the other. Regardless of where people landed, one thing was clear: Jack Black's roast had ignited a cultural moment. It became more than just a joke. It became a mirror, one that reflected society's growing unease with celebrity sanctimony, the commodification of mental health, and the performance of authenticity. Whether or not Meghan intended it, her brand had become a lightning rod for debates far bigger than a single candle or quote. And as the week wore on, and the algorithms slowed their frenzy, one question lingered in the public mind. What would Meghan do next? Would she double down on her brand's sincerity, laugh it off, and appear on a talk show with Jack Black? Or would she retreat, reconsider, and rebrand again? That question, along with the spectacle of this public roasting, was enough to keep millions watching, waiting, and refreshing their feeds for the next chapter in a saga that felt half royal scandal, half reality show. And for better or worse, Meghan was at the center of it once more. As the internet continued to swirl with memes, hot takes, and think pieces in the wake of Jack Black's now infamous roast, the world waited with bated breath for Meghan Markle's response. Would she issue a statement? Would she ignore it completely and move on? Or would she, in a calculated move, seize the moment and reframe the narrative? What followed was a masterclass in celebrity crisis management, or, depending on whom you ask, a public relations misstep that only deepened the divide between her and the public. The first sign of Meghan's approach came not through a press release, but through a carefully staged Instagram post. On her lifestyle brand's official page, with Love, Meghan, a serene photo appeared of Meghan meditating in a sun-drenched garden, surrounded by sage bundles, candles, and crystal bowls. The caption, written in a minimalist sans serif font, read, "Sometimes, the loudest noise is the voice of fear. I choose love." There was no mention of Jack Black, no direct response to the roast. But the timing of the post, barely 48 hours after the viral moment, was not lost on anyone. Critics saw the post as evasive and tone-deaf. Comment sections exploded with divided reactions. Supporters applauded her grace and refusal to be drawn into what they saw as a petty media firestorm. "She's taking the high road," wrote one follower. "This is exactly what self-love looks like." Others were less forgiving. "This is not love, it's brand manipulation," a popular comment read. "Just admit the joke landed because it was true." The battle lines had been drawn. But Meghan was just getting started. Within days, she arranged an exclusive interview with a sympathetic media outlet, Harper's Bazaar, a magazine known for its fawning coverage of modern feminism and celebrity empowerment. The feature, which appeared under the headline "Owning Her Truth," Meghan Markle on Resilience, Ridicule, and Rising Above, aimed to reframe the narrative. It included a professionally shot photo spread, Meghan in soft linen, barefoot in nature, and a series of introspective quotes that sought to humanize her journey. In the interview, she addressed the roast in veiled terms. "There will always be those who seek to diminish women who speak their truth," she said. "But I've learned that being misunderstood is sometimes the price of authenticity." When asked directly if she was referring to Jack Black, she smiled and replied, "I don't waste energy on projections. I focus on healing." The interview attempted to walk a delicate line, acknowledging the cultural moment without giving it too much oxygen. But rather than diffusing the controversy, it reignited it. Critics accused Meghan of weaponizing vague platitudes to avoid accountability. "It's not healing if it's just branding," one media analyst said during a morning segment on BBC News. "This was a moment for real dialogue, and instead, we got mood boards and affirmations." The narrative wasn't just playing out in print. Meghan's team began mobilizing her inner circle for support. Friends and acquaintances, including former co-stars from Suits, posted subtle messages of solidarity online. One posted a selfie with Meghan taken years ago, captioned, "Some people roast, others rise." The messaging was coordinated and unmistakable. Meghan was being positioned as a target of bullying, a woman rising above the noise to continue her journey. Simultaneously, with love, Meghan ramped up its product drops. A new line of essential oils was released, each one named after an emotion: clarity, grace, truth, and resilience. Product descriptions were carefully worded, with hints that these items had been inspired by recent events and the importance of staying centered in times of public scrutiny. Skeptics weren't buying it. "She's monetizing her victimhood," one social commentator tweeted. "Jack Black made a joke and she turned it into a candle." The backlash wasn't just social media snark. Some of Meghan's most vocal supporters found themselves reconsidering their loyalty. Progressive voices who once praised her as a trailblazer began questioning the authenticity of her message. In a widely shared Substack essay titled "The Princess of Perception," a former fan wrote, "Meghan has perfected the art of aesthetic activism. But activism without accountability becomes performance. And right now, we're watching a masterclass in self-preservation, not empowerment." Interestingly, Meghan's response also drew fire from the comedy community. Several comedians came to Jack Black's defense, arguing that satire is meant to provoke and that public figures, especially ones as powerful and media-savvy as Meghan, aren't above being the punchline. A viral clip from a stand-up set featured a female comic quipping, "If your brand can be destroyed by Jack Black riffing for 5 seconds, maybe your brand wasn't that strong to begin with." The audience roared. Behind the scenes, PR experts speculated that Meghan's response was a calculated move to shift the conversation from humor to harm. By positioning herself as the injured party, she reframed the narrative, said a crisis communication strategist during a panel discussion on a media podcast. But the risk is overreach. If the public senses manipulation rather than vulnerability, the strategy backfires. Indeed, for many observers, that line had already been crossed. A week after the roast, a major satire site published a parody of Meghan's brand called For Me, About Me. The fake site offered items like accountability-free journals, scented guilt diffusers, and PR-proof bubble wrap for the soul. It wasn't just a mockery of her products, it was a critique of what some saw as the self-involved ethos underpinning them. Perhaps sensing the shifting tides, Meghan's next move was more grounded. In a surprise post, she uploaded a simple photo of her and her children baking cookies in the kitchen. The caption read, "Nothing centers me like flour and little hands covered in chocolate chips." It was intimate, relatable, and absent the usual brand aesthetics. And for a moment, it worked. The image went viral, not because it was polished, but because it felt real. Comments flooded in praising her for finally showing her humanity. But even then, some remained skeptical. Everything with her feels curated, one commenter wrote. Even when it's casual, it's calculated. As the media frenzy began to slow, the long-term impact of Meghan's response remained uncertain. Some saw her as triumphant, a woman who refused to be shaken by a public dig and instead leaned into her values. Others saw a missed opportunity, an unwillingness to address critique with humility or even humor. What everyone could agree on was that the moment had revealed something deeper about the state of modern celebrity, where every joke is a potential crisis, and every crisis a potential product line. Meghan's team eventually released a limited edition candle named Unshaken. The description read, "Infused with lavender, Palo Santo, and the essence of standing tall when others try to tear you down." It sold out in under 24 hours. As the fallout from Jack Black's now infamous roast of Meghan Markle continued to ricochet through media cycles and public discourse, one group remained conspicuously silent: the British royal family. In an institution known for its obsession with image and control, their lack of response spoke volumes. The silence wasn't accidental, it was strategic. Whether it was a tactical retreat or a signal of calculated indifference remains a subject of intense speculation. But one thing is clear: behind the palace walls, decisions were being made with careful deliberation. The royal family has long adopted the mantra of never complain, never explain. It's an approach that has served them well through decades of scandal, tragedy, and relentless tabloid speculation. When Princess Diana gave her famous interview in 1995, describing her pain and isolation within the institution, the response from the palace was near total silence. When Prince Andrew faced mounting allegations of sexual misconduct, Buckingham Palace only spoke through heavily vetted statements and eventual quiet removals from public duties. It's a playbook rooted in history, stability, and the firm belief that the crown must always rise above the fray. And so, when Meghan became the focus of an international joke that spiraled into a cultural commentary, the royal family held firm. No statements were issued from Clarence House, Kensington Palace, or Buckingham Palace. There were no leaks to friendly reporters, no discreet corrections offered to sympathetic outlets. In an age where everyone races to control the narrative, the royals' refusal to engage was both maddening and mystifying to outsiders. Inside royal circles, however, silence does not equal inaction. Palace insiders, speaking on condition of anonymity, indicated that the roast and the explosive reactions it ignited had not gone unnoticed. Courtiers reportedly monitored social media sentiment, press coverage, and the public's shifting perceptions of Meghan. "It's all data to them," said a former royal aide. "They don't react emotionally. They're watching, analyzing, and waiting to see where the chips fall." Some royal watchers believe the silence was a deliberate move to isolate Meghan further. By refusing to acknowledge the situation, the royal family avoided lending it legitimacy. They also sidestepped the risk of appearing sympathetic to a woman who had become a polarizing figure, not just in Britain, but globally. After all, Meghan's dramatic departure from the royal family, alongside Prince Harry, had left deep scars. Their tell-all interview with Oprah Winfrey painted a damning portrait of institutional coldness and racial insensitivity, one that the monarchy has never fully recovered from in the public eye. Still, others argue that the silence was not so much about punishing Meghan as it was about protecting the institution. The royals understand that any comment, no matter how neutral, would drag the entire family into a media storm. Responding might mean choosing sides, either defending Meghan and alienating their traditional base, or criticizing her and confirming the worst assumptions of her supporters. So they said nothing. And in doing so, they maintained plausible deniability and their carefully cultivated aura of regal detachment. Yet not all royals remained entirely passive. Royal engagements in the weeks following the roast featured subtle gestures and carefully choreographed moments that some believed were thinly veiled responses. Princess Anne, ever the embodiment of no-nonsense stoicism, appeared at a women's leadership summit in Birmingham and was asked, off-script, about female resilience. Her reply: "Resilience isn't about branding. It's about rolling up your sleeves and doing the work, even when no one is looking," drew quiet nods of agreement in the room. While she made no mention of Meghan, the implication was hard to ignore. Similarly, Queen Camilla was photographed attending a garden party wearing a brooch known to symbolize discretion and dignity, a piece previously worn by Queen Elizabeth II during moments of public tension. Royal fashion is never just about aesthetics, it is a coded language of its own. Observers took the message to heart. The Queen Consort was signaling solidarity with tradition, resilience, and royal restraint in the face of spectacle. Meanwhile, Prince William and Princess Catherine maintained a public schedule heavy with humanitarian work, community visits, and engagements emphasizing stability. They smiled, shook hands, posed for photos, and appeared, at least on the surface, entirely untouched by the maelstrom around Meghan. Yet their silence, too, was interpreted differently by various factions. To some, it was a dignified refusal to be drawn into manufactured drama. To others, it was a cold dismissal of a family member's public humiliation. The media's role in interpreting this silence cannot be overstated. British tabloids speculated endlessly about what was being said behind closed doors. Headlines screamed of royal snub, and palace freezes out Meghan again. Anonymous sources were quoted offering contradictory narratives, some claiming the family was secretly furious with Jack Black for fanning the flames, others insisting the royals found the joke not worth dignifying with a response. The absence of official word allowed rumor to flourish, a vacuum eagerly filled by both monarchists and critics. Royal commentators also noted that the royal family may have recognized an advantage in letting Meghan take the spotlight alone. For years, the Sussexes had portrayed themselves as unfairly targeted by the institution. But now, with Meghan weathering criticism unaided by the crown, public perception began to shift. Was this woman truly a victim of the monarchy, or simply a celebrity unprepared for the scrutiny that comes with global fame? There was also the matter of optics. By staying silent, the royals avoided the appearance of gloating or piling on. After all, Jack Black's joke had drawn blood. It exposed real cracks in Meghan's public image. Had the royal family responded, it could have been seen as triumphalism. By declining to comment, they denied critics the opportunity to accuse them of opportunism. Some insiders believe King Charles himself was the architect of this silence. A man known for his meticulous management of public image, Charles has become increasingly cautious in his reign. He reportedly told advisors that dignity is louder than drama, and that responding to every slight, especially one delivered from a Hollywood stage, would only elevate the distraction. For Charles, maintaining focus on the crown's stability in a turbulent world was more important than correcting narratives. Yet silence is not without consequences. As Meghan continued to draw attention, both positive and negative, the royal family's refusal to engage allowed conspiracy theories and exaggerated narratives to flourish. In absence of fact, fiction reigned. Was the Queen's brooch really a signal? Was Princess in throwing shade? Did William privately thank Jack Black for saying what the royals could not? These were the questions populating message boards, podcasts, and late-night TV monologues. For many in the public, the silence left room for their own interpretations, shaped by bias and emotion. To Meghan's detractors, the royal family's silence was proof of her irrelevance, a non-person not worth defending. To her supporters, the silence was cruel, yet another example of the royal family's cold-heartedness. To the unaligned, it was simply a calculated move by an institution allergic to controversy, one that had no interest in lending oxygen to a wildfire. As time passed, and the media cycle shifted to new topics, the royal family's silence stood unshaken. It was a gamble that the public would move on, that Meghan's drama would burn itself out, and that the monarchy's reputation would remain intact by virtue of its detachment. And for the moment, that gamble seemed to pay off. Yet the tension remained. The wounds between the royals and the Sussexes were far from healed. And as Meghan continued to redefine her public image on her own terms, without the backing or interference of the crown, the silence from across the Atlantic felt less like indifference and more like a message in itself. As the fallout from Jack Black's roast of Meghan Markle continued to dominate headlines, speculation naturally turned to those closest to her. What were her friends saying behind closed doors? Would high-profile allies step up publicly to defend her? Or would the controversy trigger a quiet retreat among those who once championed her as a beacon of modern royalty and progress? The answer, it seemed, was a mix of both, a cautious chess game played out in the public eye and the shadows of Hollywood's elite circles. Meghan's inner circle has always been a unique blend of entertainment royalty, political influencers, wellness moguls, and socially conscious entrepreneurs. When she first emerged as Prince Harry's partner, her celebrity network, already substantial from her years in Hollywood, grew more formidable. She became the center of a nexus where activism, fame, and power intersected. People like Serena Williams, Oprah Winfrey, Gayle King, Ellen DeGeneres, Amal Clooney, and Tyler Perry were among those believed to be part of her tight-knit group. But even in such a constellation of stars, controversies like Jack Black's joke cast long shadows. In the immediate aftermath of the roast, there was a deafening quiet from those who typically supported Meghan. There were no social media posts condemning Jack Black's remarks. No public declarations of solidarity from high-profile friends. Even activist allies who had previously defended her against media harassment were noticeably silent. This wasn't necessarily an abandonment, it was strategy. Public relations experts were quick to point out that in the world of celebrity, silence often isn't a sign of indifference, but of calibration. This kind of backlash becomes radioactive very quickly, said Dana Fields, a celebrity crisis manager based in Los Angeles. Everyone who supports Meghan is being advised to wait, to watch, and not to speak unless they're absolutely sure of the public sentiment. Meghan's team, particularly her public relations consultants, were undoubtedly working overtime. Sources close to the Sussexes' camp revealed that internal discussions focused on minimizing the perception that Meghan was rattled. The priority wasn't retaliation, it was recalibration. Her brand, built on empowerment, integrity, and self-determination, couldn't afford to appear reactionary or thin-skinned. The irony, of course, was that silence, which was once used against the monarchy, was now being employed as Meghan's shield. Behind the scenes, Meghan's allies were not as quiet. According to insider accounts, Meghan had conversations with close friends like Serena Williams and Priyanka Chopra, both of whom have long histories of dealing with media scrutiny. These conversations, while private, reportedly centered around support, emotional validation, and advice on navigating controversy without giving it more oxygen. They're telling her to ride it out, one source noted. Because if she reacts too strongly, she'll confirm the narrative that she can't take a joke or handle criticism. Tyler Perry, whose relationship with Meghan became widely known when he offered the couple his home during their royal exit, was also reported to be a voice of reassurance. Though he didn't take to social media, those familiar with his thinking say he advised discretion and composure, stressing that silence sometimes speaks louder than indignation. At the same time, there were whispers of Meghan consulting her legal team, not to pursue any action against Jack Black, which would have been seen as overly litigious, but to explore the boundaries of defamation and character attacks in media. It was likely a precautionary measure, a way to signal seriousness without escalating the conflict. Interestingly, the Hollywood community seemed split in its reactions. Some comedians and talk show hosts subtly referenced the situation, debating whether Jack Black had crossed a line. Others defended him, asserting that comedy, by its very nature, should provoke and challenge. Still, there was an undercurrent of unease. While few wanted to publicly side against Meghan, even fewer wanted to be seen as defending a joke that many perceived as cruel or unnecessary. Ellen DeGeneres, long associated with Meghan through their shared work on animal rights and lifestyle branding, made a cryptic comment during her podcast that some interpreted as a veiled nod to the situation. "Sometimes you've got to laugh at yourself, but that doesn't mean everyone else gets a free pass," she said during an episode discussing comedy and public figures. She didn't mention Meghan by name, but fans and media alike connected the dots. Another noteworthy figure was Oprah Winfrey. The media mogul, who conducted Meghan and Harry's explosive 2021 interview, had not issued any direct statements. However, her network, OWN, did feature a segment on one of its daytime panels discussing the broader implications of public humor and gendered attacks in media. One panelist remarked, "When a woman reclaims her narrative, she becomes a target. That's not just about Meghan. It's about all women in the spotlight." Again, indirect but unmistakable in its alignment. Public reaction to the perceived silence of Meghan's inner circle was mixed. Some critics accused her of losing the support she once commanded, suggesting that even her closest allies were distancing themselves to avoid association with controversy. Others praised the quiet dignity of her response and her circle's loyalty in not adding fuel to the fire. In a media environment where every word is dissected, sometimes loyalty is best expressed by not speaking at all. Meghan's own response, or lack thereof, also played into this narrative. Unlike previous incidents where she chose to address criticism through interviews or statements, This time she opted for what insiders described as quiet fortitude. She continued her scheduled appearances, including a digital summit for her new lifestyle brand and a children's literacy campaign she had co-founded. Her demeanor remained composed, her speeches focused on empowerment and community, steering clear of any mention of the roast. Some suggested this was a new phase in Meghan's public strategy, one where she lets the work speak louder than the noise. This shift seemed designed not only to weather the storm but to redirect the narrative altogether. Her camp began scheduling interviews with media outlets known for more sympathetic coverage, though with a strict condition. No questions about Jack Black, the roast, or the backlash. It was a tightrope walk: maintain visibility, project strength, but don't fan the flames. Meanwhile, publicists and media handlers in Hollywood were taking note of the broader lessons. "What Meghan's doing is textbook damage control," said PR strategist Helen Ray. "She's leveraging soft power, appearances, goodwill campaigns, selective media engagement. It's not flashy, but it works, especially when your brand is at stake." One of the more curious aspects of the fallout was how it affected Harry. While the spotlight remained firmly on Meghan, there was growing chatter about his role, or lack thereof, in publicly defending his wife. Observers noted that Harry, too, remained silent. There were no statements, no press releases, no leaks. Was he advised to remain quiet, or was this mutual strategy? Either way, the silence was interpreted by many as coordinated, deliberate, and reflective of the couple's evolving media strategy. Their team, once reactive and confrontational, now seemed more poised and focused on the long game. The lesson learned from previous media battles, including the backlash from their Netflix docuseries and Harry's memoir, seemed to have informed this new approach. Rather than trying to counter every criticism or correct every narrative, the Sussexes appeared to be prioritizing control, not confrontation. And in the background, Meghan's core supporters, the ones not in the limelight, rallied in subtler ways. Online forums, fan accounts, and grassroots social media campaigns reignited. Hashtags like #WeStandWithMeghan and #RespectDuchessMeghan trended in specific regions. Petitions condemning Jack Black's roast gathered signatures. Opinion pieces defending Meghan began appearing in digital lifestyle publications and social justice blogs. It wasn't a tidal wave, but it was steady and vocal. As days turned into weeks, it became clear that Meghan's inner circle had made a calculated choice. Rather than ignite a media feud or wage a public campaign, they had chosen resilience and recalibration. It was a strategy rooted in the understanding that public opinion is fickle and that, in the age of 24-hour news cycles, even the most outrageous moments eventually fade. The goal was not to win the argument. It was to outlast the noise. Whether this strategy will prove successful in reshaping Meghan's public perception remains to be seen. But one thing is certain. Her inner circle, far from being absent, was playing a quiet but pivotal role. And in doing so, they reminded the world that silence, when executed with precision, can be the most powerful response of all. As the dust from Jack Black's explosive roast of Meghan Markle began to settle in the United States, across the Atlantic, another storm was quietly brewing inside the walls of Buckingham Palace. While the British royal family has long adhered to the mantra of never complain, never explain, events in recent years have tested that doctrine to its breaking point. In the wake of the roast and the renewed media scrutiny surrounding Meghan Markle, the palace found itself at a crossroads, one that demanded a response, however subtle, to protect both its legacy and its future. The royal household, though often perceived as reactive, is far more strategic than most imagine. Every decision, from who attends what event to which statements are quietly issued to the press, is meticulously calculated. The monarchy's role in the modern age has evolved into one of image management as much as it is about ceremonial duties. And so, when Meghan Markle once again found herself at the epicenter of controversy, this time from outside the royal sphere, the palace had to make decisions with long-term implications. The initial response from the palace was silence, in keeping with tradition. But insiders suggested that beneath the composed exterior, there was a flurry of discussions happening behind the scenes. According to sources close to royal aides, the senior royals were informed almost immediately of the incident, and briefings were held to assess the potential repercussions. The concern wasn't just about Meghan's reputation, but about how the Sussexes' continuing presence in global headlines reflected on the monarchy. Though Harry and Meghan had stepped back from royal duties years ago, they had never fully severed their ties to the institution. Their titles remained intact, and public perception continued to associate them, however contentiously, with the crown. That association meant that when Meghan was publicly humiliated or framed as controversial, the ripples reached the royal family as well. Queen Camilla, who has taken on an increasingly active role since King Charles's health began deteriorating earlier in the year, was said to be particularly irked by the incident. According to an insider close to Clarence House, Camilla saw the roast as a rare opportunity, not just to step up in her own right, but to remind the world of the institution's gravitas and the importance of decorum. She reportedly expressed her distaste for what she described as celebrity games and American theatrics, and made subtle moves to reinforce the palace's distance from the Sussexes. Those moves became apparent when a royal charity event, initially rumored to be considering inviting the Sussexes in a gesture of goodwill, was revised to exclude them entirely. The palace released a statement emphasizing the event's focus on current working royals and their contributions to British society, a line many interpreted as a clear rebuke. It was a quiet but sharp delineation between those who remained loyal to the royal path and those who had strayed. Prince William, always the symbol of continuity and tradition, also played a role in the palace's countermove. While he refrained from speaking publicly about the roast, sources close to Kensington Palace revealed that William viewed the controversy as further evidence of the dangers of intertwining royal identity with celebrity culture. In private, he reportedly told aides that the monarchy could not afford to be drawn into another media circus, especially one as trivial yet potentially damaging as a celebrity roast. But it wasn't just what the palace didn't say, it was what they chose to highlight instead. In the weeks following the controversy, senior royals became markedly more visible. Prince William and Princess Kate ramped up their public appearances, with a slew of engagements focused on mental health, early childhood education, and veterans affairs. Each appearance was carefully choreographed, not just to fulfill royal duties, but to contrast the steady, grounded presence of the traditional royals with the often chaotic narrative surrounding Meghan and Harry. Palace media teams worked with trusted journalists to frame these appearances as examples of royal resilience and quiet dedication. The unspoken subtext was clear. While the Sussexes might command headlines through controversy, the future of the monarchy lay in stability and service. Behind closed doors, royal communication advisors were reportedly encouraged to continue this strategy. What one insider called saturation by contrast. At the same time, several friendly media outlets in the UK published retrospective analyses of Meghan and Harry's exit from royal life. Though framed as neutral reporting, the tone of these pieces was unmistakably critical. They rehashed past controversies, questioned the couple's judgment, and subtly hinted that Meghan's latest media spotlight was yet another example of how incompatible she had always been with royal life. While the palace denied involvement, the timing and consistency of the narrative suggested coordination, or at the very least, consent. Then came the real curveball, an unconfirmed report that the palace was quietly reviewing the usage of royal titles among non-working royals. The discussion reportedly began in light of growing public sentiment that individuals who no longer serve the crown should not benefit from its trappings. Though Meghan and Harry's Duke and Duchess titles had long been a sore point for many traditionalists, the report triggered fresh debate. Royal observers noted that while it was unlikely the titles would be stripped outright, a move that would only serve to inflame tensions, it was entirely plausible that the palace might restrict how those titles are used in commercial or public settings. The review, if accurate, signaled a subtle yet impactful shift. It wasn't about vengeance, it was about protection. The monarchy, in an age of increasing scrutiny, was tightening its parameters. Even more telling was the way the palace handled the media. Historically criticized for being behind the times, the royal family has, in recent years, embraced a more agile media strategy. They now engage through social media platforms, digital press releases, and direct engagement with friendly publications. Following the roast controversy, royal media teams worked to fill the digital space with positive stories about working royals, effectively drowning out the noise around Meghan. It was not so much a denial of the roast's significance, but a deliberate redirection of the public's gaze. Meanwhile, back in the Sussex camp, there were whispers of unease. The more Meghan attempted to distance herself from the controversy by staying silent, the more the palace filled the vacuum with their own narrative. And with the public eye so focused on royal conduct, the contrast became stark. One side was embroiled in controversy over a roast and celebrity culture, while the other was engaged in community service, public duty, and national stability. King Charles, whose public appearances had been limited due to health concerns, made a symbolic return during a major state function. The event was marked not just by the monarch's presence but by the guest list. A who's who of political and philanthropic leaders, with no sign of Harry or Meghan. The event's theme, heritage and duty in a modern age, seemed tailor-made to send a message. Though Charles made no mention of the Sussexes, royal watchers noted his emphasis on unity, resilience, and the service that binds us. Perhaps the most significant of all the palace's countermoves came in the form of a new initiative announced by Princess Kate. Titled Together for Tomorrow, the program focused on uniting youth across the Commonwealth through service and education. The launch was accompanied by glowing press coverage, international interest, and endorsements from world leaders. It was a masterclass in contrast, a demonstration of how the palace intended to stake its future on substance rather than spectacle. Through all of this, the question lingered: would the palace eventually take overt action, or would the passive-aggressive PR maneuvers continue to be their weapon of choice? For now, the answer seemed clear. The royal family, wary of provoking another media firestorm, preferred the long game. They were playing not to win headlines but to win hearts and history. As for Meghan, the implications were sobering. For years, she and Harry had attempted to navigate a space between royalty and celebrity. But Jack Black's roast, and the palace's quiet yet pointed reaction, made clear just how tenuous that balancing act had become. The palace was reclaiming its narrative, and doing so not with harsh words, but with presence, poise, and carefully plotted moves. In the world of royalty, subtlety is power. And if the palace's response proved anything, it was that they still wielded that power with precision. Where others shouted, the monarchy whispered, and in that whisper lay centuries of authority in the quiet promise that they were not ready to be overshadowed by former members, however controversial or famous they may be. As the media storm from Jack Black's unexpected roast of Meghan Markle raged on, with late-night shows, tabloids, and social media feeding off every meme, soundbite, and satirical punchline, the real tremors were felt behind the closed doors of the Sussex household. Far from the cameras and curated Instagram posts, Meghan and Harry found themselves grappling with the uncomfortable reality that their carefully constructed narrative of resilience, independence, and self-reinvention was beginning to fray. For the first time since their departure from royal life, the backlash wasn't simply coming from palace loyalists or right-wing tabloids. This time, it came from comedians, mainstream celebrities, and most worryingly, an indifferent public. In Montecito, the mood shifted dramatically. According to sources close to the couple, what began as shock over the roast quickly turned into intense emotional strain, leading to internal disagreements that rattled even the solid core of their relationship. Meghan, known for her assertiveness and strategic thinking, reportedly saw the roast not just as an attack on her character, but as a threat to the brand she and Harry had worked so meticulously to build. Her public image was never merely about fame. It was crafted around themes of empowerment, compassion, and breaking barriers. The roast, in its brazen mockery, cut deeply against that ethos. For Harry, however, the experience hit differently. Though no stranger to media scrutiny, he had long hoped that his break from the royal family would buy him and his wife peace, if not approval. The ridicule brought on by the roast was a painful reminder that escaping the institution did not necessarily mean escaping the spotlight or the criticism that came with it. Some insiders claimed that Harry initially downplayed the roast, urging Meghan to let it go, to laugh it off or ignore it. But Meghan, never one to stay silent in the face of public criticism, took it personally and wanted to respond. What followed, according to reports from staff within their media team, was a sharp disagreement over strategy. Meghan allegedly pushed for a statement, something dignified yet assertive, a rebuttal cloaked in grace. She believed that silence would be interpreted as weakness, or worse, guilt. Harry, on the other hand, wanted no part in stoking the flames. Having grown up under the microscope of the British press, he was intimately familiar with the way public reactions could backfire. He reportedly warned that issuing any kind of rebuttal would only extend the news cycle and drag them further into ridicule. This difference in approach was more than a simple tactical divergence. It exposed a fundamental tension in their partnership. Meghan, with her Hollywood background and relentless drive, had always leaned toward proactive image control. Harry, shaped by a childhood of scandal and intrusive headlines, leaned toward retreat. Sources described a palpable tension during this period, one that spilled into their daily routines. Meetings with publicists grew more heated, conversations with Netflix and Spotify partners became increasingly awkward, and staff reportedly found themselves caught between conflicting instructions. Adding to the pressure was the realization that their media partnerships, many of which were under-delivering or facing criticism of their own, could be affected. The roast had thrown a spotlight on Meghan's celebrity identity, with questions being raised about her relatability, authenticity, and even her relevance. Social media, which had once served as a loyal echo chamber for the couple's fans, now reflected a far more divided sentiment. While many defended Meghan and condemned the roast as misogynistic or cruel, a growing number of voices mocked her perceived victimhood and questioned her intentions. Within the Montecito estate, once seen as a sanctuary of privacy and healing, the couple found themselves increasingly isolated, not just from the public, but from their inner circle. Some former friends, according to palace-adjacent sources, quietly distanced themselves, wary of being caught in the backlash. Others, particularly within Hollywood, took a more pragmatic stance, evaluating their own brands and whether affiliation with the Sussexes was still advantageous. One source close to a prominent entertainment agency revealed that several producers began second-guessing projects linked to the couple. It wasn't just about the roast, it was about the broader shift in public perception. Meghan, once seen as a bold trailblazer, was now being discussed in boardrooms as a polarizing figure, someone whose involvement in a project could be a risk rather than a guarantee of attention. This professional uncertainty crept into their personal lives. With Harry reportedly spending more time on his upcoming documentary about military veterans and mental health, and Meghan focusing on new lifestyle projects, the distance between them was no longer just metaphorical. Sources say the couple began spending less time together during the day, with fewer joint appearances and more independent decision-making. Staffers, accustomed to their usually unified front, began noticing the cracks. Adding to the stress was the reaction of Harry's family, or rather, the lack of one. No statement was issued by the royal family, no comment made, no messages of support sent. The silence was deafening. To Harry, who still harbored hope for reconciliation with his father and brother, it was another painful reminder of how far he had drifted from the world he once called home. Meghan interpreted the silence differently. To her, it was further proof that the palace was pleased with her discomfort, content to let the public skewering continue unchecked. In private conversations, Meghan reportedly expressed frustration not just with the roast, but with the trajectory of their post-royal lives. While they had achieved financial independence and relocated far from the palace walls, they were still unable to escape the shadow of royalty. Every move they made, every word spoken or left unsaid, was scrutinized through the lens of their past. Even their successes were often framed in contrast to their royal origins, never allowed to stand on their own. For Meghan, this realization triggered what insiders called a period of introspection. She began reassessing her public engagements, her upcoming book project, and even her philanthropic priorities. Some of her closest advisors urged a complete rebrand, a fresh chapter that moved away from the Sussex identity and focused solely on her as a public figure. But such a move posed immense risk. The Sussex brand was powerful, and divorcing from it meant walking away from the very platform that had elevated her voice on the global stage. Harry, meanwhile, remained torn. His loyalty to Meghan was unwavering, but he reportedly felt the weight of their collective decisions more heavily than ever before. He had traded one cage for another, a palace for a glass house in California. And while he had chosen that life freely, the constant barrage of criticism and public missteps had begun to wear him down. Friends claimed he grew quieter in recent weeks, less visible at local events, more absorbed in his own thoughts. Despite the tension and the mounting pressure, the couple put on a united front when they appeared in public. Their body language remained close, their words carefully coordinated, their smiles measured. But those familiar with the intricacies of PR optics noted a subtle change. The chemistry that once radiated from their joint appearances felt slightly subdued, as if both were operating under the weight of an invisible burden. In an effort to regain control of their narrative, the couple reportedly scheduled a private session with a crisis communications expert, someone known for handling reputational recoveries in Hollywood. The session, according to a source familiar with the matter, focused on long-term image rehabilitation, including distancing from polarizing topics, recalibrating their public voice, and most importantly, crafting a path forward that did not rely on rebuttals or emotional appeals. Meghan was advised to lay low for a time, to avoid further public statements, and to let the media cycle shift away naturally. The expert reportedly emphasized that public sentiment was like a tide. It could turn just as quickly as it had risen. But whether Meghan would follow this advice remained unclear. For someone so accustomed to defending her story, silence felt like surrender. Ultimately, the fallout from the roast wasn't just about one night of jokes. It was a mirror held up to the Sussexes' entire journey. It exposed vulnerabilities they had long tried to shield, brought tensions to the surface, and forced them to confront hard truths about their image, their relationship, and their future. They had walked away from the royal family to write their own story, but now, that story was being rewritten by others, and they were left deciding how, or if, they could reclaim the pen. As the smoke cleared from Jack Black's scathing roast of Meghan Markle, attention quickly turned to Hollywood's reaction. While the general public engaged in endless debates online, some celebrating the audacity, others condemning the cruelty, Hollywood's response was more nuanced, if not strategic. Publicly, many celebrities stayed silent, unwilling to openly endorse or criticize the roast. Privately, however, a different story unfolded, one filled with quiet nods of approval, subtle schadenfreude, and even whispered admissions that the roast had touched on truths long whispered behind closed doors. Hollywood, for all its glamour, is a town built on power, perception, and politics. And Meghan Markle, since stepping back from royal duties and planting roots in Montecito, has walked a fine line between royal renegade and aspiring media mogul. Her foray into the entertainment industry post-Megxit was watched closely by both allies and skeptics in the industry. What many hadn't expected was the degree of resentment quietly brewing beneath the surface, particularly among those who felt Meghan had skipped the queue, arriving at Hollywood's power table not through the traditional grind, but by leveraging her royal status. Several insiders from major studios and streaming platforms have admitted, off the record, that the roast simply gave voice to what many had been thinking but were too politically cautious to say aloud. One studio executive, who had previously worked on a project pitched to Netflix involving the Sussexes, confided that Meghan's demands and expectations were astonishing for someone still relatively new to the upper echelons of entertainment. She acted like a top-tier producer, but didn't have the body of work to back it up, he said. Everyone was afraid to tell her no. That sentiment was echoed by several writers and creatives who had interacted with the couple during early-stage pitches. While most praised Harry for being approachable and sincere, Meghan was often described as difficult to please, overly image-conscious, and at times, dismissive of creative opinions that didn't align with her narrative. These grievances never made it into the press, until the roast cracked open the door. Suddenly, frustrations that had simmered behind the scenes began leaking out, couched in industry chatter and late-night cocktail party whispers. Comedians, naturally, were the first to pounce. In the wake of Jack Black's roast, several stand-up comics and late-night hosts chimed in with thinly veiled jabs, sarcastic tweets, and follow-up routines. These were more than just cheap shots. They were signals, a kind of tribal recognition that Meghan and Harry were now fair game. Once revered, then cautiously handled, the couple had crossed an invisible line, becoming targets not just of tabloid mockery, but of Hollywood satire, a more brutal, less forgiving arena. One prominent comedian, known for pushing boundaries and political commentary, privately told a journalist that Meghan made herself untouchable for too long. The comic added, "People in our field don't like being told who they can or can't mock." She tried to use victimhood as a shield, and that never works in comedy. If you're a public figure, you're open to critique. Perhaps more surprising were the reactions from A-listers and industry veterans who, while not vocally endorsing the roast, didn't shy away from privately agreeing with its tone. An Oscar-winning actress, who had once sat next to Meghan at a high-profile charity event, was overheard saying she needed to be taken down a peg. That entitlement was off the charts. Another Hollywood insider, speaking on background, noted that a lot of people have Meghan fatigue. But this was more than just personal resentment. It was also about power dynamics. Meghan's perceived fast track to power. Signing multi-million-dollar deals with Netflix and Spotify, securing interviews with Oprah, and speaking at elite conferences, ruffled feathers among those who had spent decades building their own brands. In an industry where respect is earned through a combination of grit, talent, and networking, her royal status often felt like a shortcut. And while it initially bought her admiration and access, it eventually began to breed resentment. Another crucial element was the way Meghan and Harry had positioned themselves, both as insiders and outsiders. They were royal yet rebellious, celebrities yet activists, players in the game who also critiqued the rules. This duality made them hard to pin down and harder to trust. For some in Hollywood, that ambiguity felt manipulative. One well-known director said, "You can't play both sides forever. Either you're against the establishment or you're building one of your own." Interestingly, some celebrities who had previously championed Meghan's causes began to pull back. Posts celebrating her achievements quietly disappeared from Instagram grids. Endorsements became more cautious. Even brand collaborations that once seemed inevitable were shelved or postponed. A fashion designer who had dressed Meghan for a major event noted that the calls stopped coming. There was a time when just mentioning Meghan would get you press. Now, people aren't so sure. They're waiting to see how this all plays out. And yet, not everyone was reveling in the fallout. There were those who expressed quiet concern about the industry's tendency to build up and tear down public figures with equal fervor. A well-known talent agent remarked, "Hollywood loves a redemption arc, but first it needs a fall from grace. Meghan might be in that fall now, but don't count her out." Still, the underlying sentiment in many Hollywood circles was that the roast had struck a nerve. And for good reason. It tapped into a growing skepticism about celebrity activism, performative wokeness, and the commodification of personal struggle. Meghan, who had positioned herself as a modern feminist icon, had become emblematic of those contradictions. She preached privacy but courted publicity, spoke of healing but harbored grudges, denounced institutions while building one of her own. Perhaps the most telling development came from Netflix executives, who had reportedly been monitoring the fallout closely. While there was no official comment, internal memos hinted at growing concern over the couple's polarizing effect on viewership demographics. With several major content projects still in limbo, and pressure mounting from shareholders to deliver more hits and fewer controversies, Meghan and Harry were no longer seen as surefire assets. The roast had turned them from symbols into liabilities, at least temporarily. Other celebrities, particularly those outside the traditional Hollywood circuit, began weighing in more openly. Joe Rogan, for instance, took time on his podcast to joke about the roast and the Sussexes' reaction, framing it as a classic example of overprivileged fragility. Elon Musk liked several posts mocking Meghan, triggering a wave of memes and speculation about his own stance. Even Madonna, known for her often cryptic social media, posted an image with a caption that many interpreted as a veiled jab at Meghan's perceived victimhood. But amid all the jabs and laughter, a deeper truth began to crystallize. Meghan Markle had become a symbol. For some, she represented courage and transformation. For others, she embodied the pitfalls of unchecked ambition and media manipulation. And as with all symbols, the real person behind the image was often lost in the noise. That noise, amplified by Hollywood's passive-aggressive response, threatened to drown out whatever message Meghan and Harry hoped to promote next. The roast had exposed not just a gap in public perception, but a chasm between the couple's narrative and the way they were being received. Celebrities, influencers, and media elites had begun treating them less as allies and more as liabilities. And in a town built on alliances, perception is everything. In the weeks that followed, Meghan's team reportedly reached out to several former Hollywood allies to gauge the temperature. The responses, though polite, were telling. Projects were in development limbo. Dates were being finalized. Schedules were packed. The message was clear, the tide had shifted, and Meghan was no longer the industry darling she once was. Still, Hollywood's memory is short, and reinvention is always an option. Meghan's future would depend not on silencing critics, but on outlasting them. Whether she could weather the storm and emerge with a stronger, more grounded public image remained to be seen. But for now, the backlash was real, the support quiet, and the laughter from the roast still echoing in Hollywood's most powerful rooms. Interestingly, some celebrities who had previously championed Meghan's causes began to pull back. Posts celebrating her achievements quietly disappeared from Instagram grids. Endorsements became more cautious. Even brand collaborations that once seemed inevitable were shelved or postponed. A fashion designer who had dressed Meghan for a major event noted that the calls stopped coming. There was a time when just mentioning Meghan would get you press. Now, people aren't so sure. They're waiting to see how this all plays out. And yet, not everyone was reveling in the fallout. There were those who expressed quiet concern about the industry's tendency to build up and tear down public figures with equal fervor. A well-known talent agent remarked, "Hollywood loves a redemption arc, but first it needs a fall from grace. Meghan might be in that fall now, but don't count her out." Still, the underlying sentiment in many Hollywood circles was that the roast had struck a nerve. And for good reason. It tapped into a growing skepticism about celebrity activism, performative wokeness, and the commodification of personal struggle. Meghan, who had positioned herself as a modern feminist icon, had become emblematic of those contradictions. She preached privacy but courted publicity, spoke of healing but harbored grudges, denounced institutions while building one of her own. Perhaps the most telling development came from Netflix executives, who had reportedly been monitoring the fallout closely. While there was no official comment, internal memos hinted at growing concern over the couple's polarizing effect on viewership demographics. With several major content projects still in limbo, and pressure mounting from shareholders to deliver more hits and fewer controversies, Meghan and Harry were no longer seen as surefire assets. The roast had turned them from symbols into liabilities, at least temporarily. Other celebrities, particularly those outside the traditional Hollywood circuit, began weighing in more openly. Joe Rogan, for instance, took time on his podcast to joke about the roast and the Sussexes' reaction, framing it as a classic example of overprivileged fragility. Elon Musk liked several posts mocking Meghan, triggering a wave of memes and speculation about his own stance. Even Madonna, known for her often cryptic social media, posted an image with a caption that many interpreted as a veiled jab at Meghan's perceived victimhood. But amid all the jabs and laughter, a deeper truth began to crystallize. Meghan Markle had become a symbol. For some, she represented courage and transformation. For others, she embodied the pitfalls of unchecked ambition and media manipulation. And as with all symbols, the real person behind the image was often lost in the noise. That noise, amplified by Hollywood's passive-aggressive response, threatened to drown out whatever message Meghan and Harry hoped to promote next. The roast had exposed not just a gap in public perception, but a chasm between the couple's narrative and the way they were being received. Celebrities, influencers, and media elites had begun treating them less as allies and more as liabilities. And in a town built on alliances, perception is everything. In the weeks that followed, Meghan's team reportedly reached out to several former Hollywood allies to gauge the temperature. The responses, though polite, were telling. Projects were in development limbo. Dates were being finalized. Schedules were packed. The message was clear, the tide had shifted, and Meghan was no longer the industry darling she once was. Still, Hollywood's memory is short, and reinvention is always an option. Meghan's future would depend not on silencing critics, but on outlasting them. Whether she could weather the storm and emerge with a stronger, more grounded public image remained to be seen. But for now, the backlash was real, the support quiet, and the laughter from the roast still echoing in Hollywood's most powerful rooms.